So about a third of dementias are not, their primary causes, if you like, are not genetic, they're more environmental. So they're affected by the lives we lead. And it can be smoking, it can be drinking, it can be lack of exercise, it can be all manner of things. But the biggest of those, they've identified about 12 factors, and the biggest factor in that group is hearing loss.
Welcome to the Balanced Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Matt Southam. Here, we delve into candid conversations with entrepreneurs, exploring both their business journey and their secrets to maintaining mental well-being. As we navigate the balance of ambition and inner peace, I hope you find insights, inspiration, and invaluable takeaways in every episode. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Amanda. Welcome to the show. Before we talk about Eargym and why our ears are so important, let's dive into a little bit about your background. How did you get into what you're currently doing now?
Thanks, Matt. Yes, it's a weird journey, really. I had a long career in the NHS. I was nearly 30 years in the NHS, which I joined after university, where I studied psychology and sociology. And I loved working in the NHS. It's you can move from place to place. So I worked in hospitals and community units and primary care, and in commissioning. And in the latter half of my career was at board level and CEO. So commissioning population health, which is, I realise that's where my heart is really, is in, I think when you get into the NHS and you get into politics and how you spend taxpayers' money, you start to think about, obviously, there's immediate costs of running big, expensive units like big acute hospitals versus the investment that you can put into prevention so that people don't necessarily need that secondary care anyway. And for me, by the end of my career, I was far more motivated to put attention into prevention. And actually the job of a CEO is much more on the day-to-day management of budgets and trying to keep acute services working. So I left thinking I would have a go at managing population health from a different perspective. And luckily I was selected for Zinc, which is a venture capital accelerator that was focused on building businesses that could improve quality of later life for 100 million older people. And I thought, what a fantastic opportunity to have a go at something that I know about, essentially, but from an entirely different business perspective. So it's, exciting to start again, but also really, really scary. And while I was on Zinc, which was a 9-month program, somebody from the Royal National Institute for the Deaf came along, their technology lead, and just talked for an hour about hearing loss and how it's massively under-recognised and about the correlation with dementia. And I realised that despite being something of a population health strategy expert over the years, I hadn't ever commissioned anything to do with hearing because I didn't know about its prevalence nor its impact. So I got really interested and curious, and we went from there, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point you made at the start, and something I've long sort of thought is that the NHS as a system has very often, we all use it to solve a problem. So that my only interaction probably with my doctor is, I've got this issue, I want you to solve it. But actually, what you're talking there is early prevention actually can save money further down the line by, I suppose, looking after our bodies.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's the opportunity. It's, the factors in public health are, care is only one of the factors, care and treatment. You've got your environment, your housing. Have you got a job? Have you got a safe place to live? Do you have access to greenery and the outside? Can you get food? Can you eat well? And by well, I don't mean expensively. I mean access to fresh fruit and vegetables and things like that. Are you warm? Are you able to sleep? All of those things are incredibly important for our overall health and well-being, and they need as much attention as what I would call the response services for when you need an intervention for illness or injury. But sometimes, the financial pressures on the NHS and the demand for services is such that it's really hard to divert resources into prevention from within the NHS. So, it's a whole community decision, But I felt that I could have a bigger impact by being outside of the NHS rather than within.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, that especially when funds are tough, and we know the NHS really struggles with the funding it receives, is that you keep getting these people come to you with an issue, you just need to solve that, and actually it's really hard to divert those funds and do a project that perhaps long term it will make an impact, but you're sort of doing work that doesn't give that immediate result in the same way as you've treated something that someone's got at that point.
Yeah, absolutely right, Matt. I mean, the thing is, the NHS is one of the big three things for an election, alongside education and law and order. And so you can't, population health and well-being takes place over years and decades, but you get elected every 4 or 5 years. So you make short-term promises, and it's quite a gamble. And I don't think I've seen a 10-year. No, that's not fair. But the best 10-year plan was back in 1997, and the New Labour government at the time had an amazing 10-year plan. But I don't think I have experienced that kind of long-term planning since then, really. Yeah. And sorry, I'm not making a major political point, only to say
no, but I get your point.
Michael, to do that.
Yeah. It isn't there. And you're right with these 4-year terms, people come in and actually it's about short-term promises and short-term delivery, whether that happens, again, that's another discussion, but you're right, trying to put in long-term things. And actually, if I revert that back into business, my background's marketing, and actually I know that if people want quick wins, some like pay-per-click Google ads can deliver results, but actually you probably want to be looking at your branding and your perception, and actually do some brand building. But that's long-term. It's hard to attribute the results to it, but actually setting your brand up right will long-term give you the biggest impact and save you money on your marketing. But it's years and years and years, and most business owners no, I need a fix within the next 6 months.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was at the Silver Marketing Association's annual summit earlier this week, and I made a joke. It's just a joke because we've been in Belgium talking about Eargym recently, and I have referred to Eargym as the Heineken of hearing care, reaching the parts of the community that other hearing care doesn't reach. And it resonates, obviously, because an audience of people who are my age and older remember the Heineken marketing, but there is something about the time it took and the ability to reach many people in terms of the messaging that I think is really clever. If you are remembering an advert that's 40 to 50 years old, then that's a brilliant campaign, isn't it? And it's had a long-term impact.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You mentioned there about hearing loss and dementia. So explain the link to me, so I've got some context to that.
So about a third of the Lancet Commission on Dementia, which was refreshed in 2020, it was originally 2017, but refreshed in 2020, led by Professor Jill Livingston. It has tens and tens of papers, but several of them were related to the correlation between hearing loss, social isolation, mild cognitive impairment, and dementia. So about a third of dementias are not, their primary causes, if you like, are not genetic. They're more environmental. So they're affected by the lives we lead. And it can be smoking, it can be drinking, it can be lack of exercise, it can be all manner of things. But the biggest of those, they've identified about 12 factors. And the biggest factor in that group is hearing loss. So 8% of all dementias, hearing loss is the biggest, what they call amenable factor, the biggest thing that you can do something about. And 8% of all dementias is huge, obviously.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes when it comes to symptoms for dementia, and my dad lived with dementia for the last few years of his life, the symptoms of dementia and the symptoms of hearing loss can be quite strongly overlapping. So understanding the underlying cause and being able to make sure that your intervention or your support is more appropriate, to the cause is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned to you once before, I'm an ex-DJ. I say an ex-DJ, we never fully grow up, I still DJ occasionally, and I'm DJing a festival next weekend. But I used to work in nightclubs sort of, 3 nights a week, and it became quite apparent to me, or even anyone who's ever gone out to a nightclub, you wake up the following morning, your ears are still ringing, and that we do expose ourselves to these, and maybe don't realize that actually that ringing is damage, short-term damage, but eventually can lead to long-term damage to your hearing.
You're spot on, Matt. And I know that DJs never grow up. My co-founder's a DJ. So he's an ex-DJ and a digital product specialist. And we both have hearing loss. Like, I'm wearing hearing aids now, but his hearing loss is like notched. With an age-related hearing loss, you decline towards your higher frequencies. And with a noise-induced hearing loss, it's a similar symptoms, but you tend to have notches of hearing loss. You tend to lose particular frequencies. And then some higher frequencies are not so affected. We see it in both Andy and me, because I loved clubbing and gigs and all that stuff. And when you come out of those events and you've had a really good night, but when that bit where you're slightly deaf and slightly numb when you come out, that's damage. It's long-term damage. And you want to wear gig plugs for sure. They take down the decibels. It's almost a logarithmic scale when you think about exposure to noise. Is if you wear gig plugs, they can take down the noise by an average of about 17 decibels. That will move you from a quarter of an hour of safe listening to 2 hours of safe listening.
Yeah.
And it takes the distortion out of the music. So actually it doesn't change. It probably will enhance your enjoyment of the event as well. We strongly recommend wearing gig plugs.
Yeah, I got into eventually, I had some molded earplugs, the filters I had in them, because they were changeable. I had the minus 15 dB, and you're right. I could still hold conversations with people. It was fine. It just brought the level down, and it felt more comfortable. And I certainly have experienced times where it obviously is, short-term or hearing damage, that you start off, and as the night goes on, you start to try and play the music louder and louder and louder, because it's not sounding as good as it did right at the start. And that is our ears just, I assume, sort of becoming accustomed and becoming damaged, hearing fatigue, I guess, after that 15-minute period.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely spot on. I mean, you've probably, by doing that, you've really looked after and started to preserve the hearing that you have. That's a really important step. I'm so pleased you're doing that.
Yeah. So talk to me about Eargym then. So you started this up, and explain the concept to me so everyone can understand.
Yeah, so we did, when I met Andy on Zinc, he'd also joined with this view of building an age tech company. And obviously with him being a DJ and me being a population health specialist, it's quite complementary skills. And we realized also when we were checking when we were exploring the industry of hearing loss, and we were checking different hearing checks and things, we'd both realized at that point that we both experienced moderate hearing loss. And then we were recognizing the impact of unaddressed hearing loss in our families. So we started to talk a lot to the general public and do various surveys and things on social media and say, what would make you look after your hearing? Why don't you look after your hearing like your eyes or your teeth? So we know, for example, only 1 in 20 of us will check our hearing in any given year, whereas 1 in 2 of us will check our eyes or our teeth. The average first-time wearer, the average age of a first-time wearer of hearing aids is 72. It takes us 10 years normally even when we notice and know that our life is being affected by hearing loss, it will take us 10 years to do anything about it. So you start to look at the stigma and you start to think, well, why are people frightened? And it's because people perceive that the only solution is hearing aids. Losing your hearing is a sign of aging, and you're moving towards end of life. There's a signs of frailty, all of those fears. The cost of hearing aids, actually, if you're not eligible for them on the NHS, is $2,500 for a pair, the average cost. And all these things are real barriers. They're emotional and psychological and financial barriers. And and just a lack of understanding. So we deliberately set about trying to build a product that would take the fear out of hearing care. And so, and also, remove some of the other barriers like cost. So we thought something that would make it available to many people would be using your own smartphone and your own headphones and things. Something that was low cost. So we're 40 quid a year subscription. And something that was fun and enjoyable. So we went down the route of gamification, so that we've made the checks and we've built our own hearing training games, just to get people to think about their hearing and become aware and then practice listening. And then, do you mind if I just kind of talk about some of the science behind hearing training?
Go for it. Yeah, no, I'm interested.
So what we found when we were looking at, this point about people believe that hearing aids are the only solution and don't, the hearing aids are great. The tech behind hearing aids, they're really impressive. And as I said, I wear them. But what we found, we did a literature review of 3,000 papers, and we found the opportunity of auditory training. So there's some important lab-based research that shows that if you practice listening, particularly to speech in noise, you can improve your hearing by up to 25% in just 7 weeks. And then it tends, then you can maintain it if you carry on practicing. And, so that's what we went with. We thought, well, if you can improve your overall hearing capacity in that shorter time, how can we make that lab-based training, which is currently speech against white noise, can we get a similar level of improvement by making enjoyable auditory training? So we built our training games to have target sounds against ambient sound. And then we find your difficulty basically by you play our training games for a few minutes a day. And then we personalize it by adjusting the levels of the target sounds and the ambient sounds to your hearing and your performance. And we've developed 5 games so that you can choose the games that you like, if you like the ones that appeal to you. And what we've found in our studies of, and clearly we're quite early stage, so we can't replicate lab-based studies, but at the moment we're seeing about a 20% improvement on average for people who train over 4 weeks. And we have tests before and after so that you can get some evidence base of your own improvement. And so, we're on a journey. But it's a good journey at the minute.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? That the fact that, I'm always amazed at how clever our body is, our mind, and how much we can train ourselves and actually regain a lot of, some things we've maybe lost. And it is just, you don't use it, you lose it. And I guess part of that is there with your hearing. If you train your hearing, your body will enable you to hear better.
It's your brain. If you think of your hearing in 2 parts. So obviously your ear and your ability to physically take in the sound through your ear and your middle ear and your inner ear. And in your inner ear, you've got that cochlea, the snail shell.
Yep. So
the snail shell has about 18,000 hair cells, and the ones on the outer edge of the hair of the snail shell, of the cochlea, are the ones that take in high frequency. So they're the ones, and the closer you get to the center of the cochlea, then you move down through the frequencies. But the ones at the outer shell obviously get more wear and tear as we go through life and through noise exposure. And so you lose the higher frequencies. If you think of the higher frequencies, when we're in speech, you've got, and they're all the beginning and end of words. They're the higher frequencies that create the differentiation between the words that help us to understand speech. So if you lose those higher frequencies, it sounds like you're mumbling because it sounds like a run of words with no differentiation. Yeah. So you pay huge attention. You're really concentrating. When you're in the pub and it sounds like everybody's mumbling and you're really leaning in and really concentrating. Well, that's listening fatigue. That's listening effort. That's really hard work. And you start to withdraw from those situations. That's what's happening there is your auditory processing. You've taken the sound in, but your software, if you like, is the auditory processing of the sounds that have come in, of the electrical signals, to try to apply meaning to that sound. So if if you have to pay all of that attention, you are really working hard, and your listening effort is huge. So where you've got hearing hardware, you've got hearing aids that can help you improve the taking in of sound in the first place. Eargym's in the hearing software. We're helping you practice listening so that it's less effortful, so that you can hopefully listen for longer, without wanting to withdraw from your work or your social life.
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense. And that sort of software, because yes, the sound's still getting in. It's just, your brain needs to use a lot of energy
Yeah.
to be able to process it and work out the different sounds and work out, the different noises. And quite often we are having conversations in busy areas,
Yeah.
so you're getting lots of different sound. How do you separate the sound that actually you want to hear, which is the person you're talking to, and not the clatter and the background noise of the environment you're in? So yeah, that amazing. I mean, how have you said it's been quite a journey. How have you found that? What has been some of the tough parts of getting this off the ground?
Well, so we set up 4 years ago, and we incorporated Eargym in May 2020. And we're as a startup, you've got a whole funding journey, which is quite significantly different to my experience in the NHS. So that's been a huge, huge learning curve. So you're talking about getting the stages of investment, and you've probably spoken to loads of people who've done this, but it's you do your family and friends round, and then you do your early pre-seed rounds, and we're just raising seed. We've raised 3 rounds so far. We're about next week, actually, we're going to be launching a 1 million round for our next to cover us for the next stage of development. But we're also, because, as I said, we're really interested in the correlation between hearing loss and cognition and cognitive and emotional well-being. We are a research-led company, and we're very clearly identified as a research-led company. So we have been very fortunate to have research grants from UKRI, Designed for Aging, and from the Alzheimer's Society, and in the early days from the Wellcome Trust. So part of my job as the CEO is to make sure that we have sufficient funding to be able to move through stages of development. And one of the biggest things that Andy and I have learned, and we do it really well, I have to say, I think, is fail fast. So you have to do a whole series of experiments all the time. And if it's not working, you stop, because you haven't got the resources to just see, just see if we go, if we give it another month, will it work? We can't do that. So we work on a very tight budget, and we recruit people, and we have employees and contractors working for Eargym. And you're very specific about what's the task that's got to be done. Can they do it? If they're not the right people, or we're not the right fit for them, that's obviously a mistake. So we really pay attention to our recruitment process. We do values-based recruitment, because normally it's not necessarily the existing experience and knowledge that people have. It's the aptitude and the enthusiasm for the work that enables people, in a startup, as you know, everybody's all hands on deck on many different disciplines. So, keeping the business alive and in a really positive state so that we can make the product development that our users want. And, just going from step to step has been both the biggest challenge and also probably one of the most energizing ones.
Yeah, I mean, I love that sort of fail fast mentality, and I very much believe in that. But equally, there's that other side that actually consistency, eventually you get there. So do you ever find there's that challenge between, okay, what do we just need to keep going with? Is that the big goal because this is going to work, but actually the application of certain parts, actually you just need to work out what's going to work. If it doesn't, move on very quickly. Is there ever that conflict of, actually, do we need to carry on with this and invest, or do we actually move on to something else? Do you struggle with that, or have you done?
It's certainly a regular conversation is our strategy. And there's a product strategy and a business strategy, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you build if nobody wants it. It doesn't matter how good it is if nobody wants it. So it's really, really important. We do user-led design. So we have for the last 2 years, we've had a user-led design panel of 12 who have informed every stage of our product before it's gone out. But we also a B2C available on both app stores and have been for 18 months now, because the people who download, we had 25,000 downloads, give us a huge amount of feedback about what is good for them and what is not good for them. So it's really important qualitatively. And, you got a couple of days free before you need to subscribe. So you can do your hearing checks and you can try everything. And that gives us a really rich picture. And then, our main route to market is B2B, so direct with industry partnerships. And again, working out what those businesses want, what the problem is that we're solving, is really important. And sometimes we might want to solve a problem that they're not interested in solving. So for example, we had 300-400 businesses really, really genuinely interested in hearing health as an employee benefit. But overall, their feedback was, until it becomes a mandate from government, we're not going to spend resources on this. So it's really, eye checks are a mandate from government, and musculoskeletal services are a mandate, hearing care isn't yet. So we think about, well, actually, then we know employees retire, employees with hearing loss, whether or not it's diagnosed, will retire 7 to 9 years earlier than their hearing counterparts.
Okay.
There is a massive economic cost. In the UK, it's 25 billion a year related to the costs of lost productivity and early retirement in hearing loss. It's 980 billion globally. And the fact that, industry knows that it would be great to invest in hearing care for their employees, but it's not mandated, so they don't have to spend their time resources on it. And so we've had to think about what's our offer to B2B industry and where are our best partnerships if it's not priority for them yet. But obviously we keep those relationships warm.
Yeah, I mean, a question slightly separate, but going back to just the general health of the population, do you see there's going to be a shift in coming years? Yeah, not related to as such the government. They can do as much as they can, but a personal responsibility that actually we're all going to start taking care of ourselves a little bit better for the future. I've realised now, I'm in my 40s, and when I go to the gym, I'm not going to the gym for the same reasons I did when I was in my 20s. I'm not really bothered about my biceps in a t-shirt, but actually it's my general health so that I can carry on playing with my kids and eventually grandkids and things like that. I'm sort of thinking that far ahead. And do you think there will be a shift into how we look after our bodies for the future, rather than, because I mean that in turn will have an impact on the NHS from hopefully the healthier the population, the less strain there is? I know that's quite a broad question, but I'm just interested on your thoughts on that.
It's a really interesting area, and I think what we are seeing I have relationships with a lot of age tech businesses, is about starting much earlier. So, for example, we've done 400,000 ear age checks. So we set up a 30-second frequency slider, basically, which gives you a clue about whether or not your hearing is about where it would be for your decade in life. We've delivered about 410,000 of those so far, and 50% are to people aged under 24, and 70% are to people aged under 35. It's really interesting to us. We didn't expect to find that. And so what that's done is help us to know. That's the bit where, I started off in this podcast chatting about the joke about Heineken.
Yeah.
But we know that because we've taken the approach that we've taken, we're enabling people to find out about their own health. And when I talk to other age tech businesses, or, for example, at this silver marketing conference that I was at, the ability to remove barriers and to enable people to care for themselves by taking down the costs and making it available on the things that we do anyway. So, most people have got smartphones these days, and I say that advisedly. I include older age groups, that people make assumptions that older age groups are not tech savvy. In our experience, they are. And smartphone ownership is high. And then, what can we do to move our tech into mainstream tech to enable people to live well as they live their lives is really important. Same applies to food. Same applies to exercise and all of those things. So I think you raised the point. I think people do want to live well for longer. And also, of course, our generation now, my generation, I'm mid-50s, is anticipated to have an average lifespan of 92. Average lifespan. And the generations that are being born now have an average lifespan of 100 years old. That is a 4-stage life. Linda Grattan, I think I might got the name wrong, but the author of the 100-Year Life. The point is, instead of going education, work, retirement, we now do education, work for assets, like housing and stuff, work for contribution, and then retirement. So you've got 2 working lives as opposed to 1, because we're living so long. So you kind of, I think what you're tapping into is what we're all feeling, which is, crikey, I better look after myself. Otherwise I've got a huge long time ahead of me where I'm going to be, the quality of my life is going to be not so good. And also, we see pensions moving out in terms of our pensionable age and all those things. I'm sure that's going to go into the 70s fairly soon. We've got a long time to have to build up our assets to be able to live well for longer anyway as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I'm quite intrigued by a lot of that, from the fact that life has become much more comfortable, much better now, the way we lived than 100 years ago, and people are living longer. But then some of that comfort that we've implemented is actually maybe detrimental to our health. The processed food that we all have, we've never had such an easy access to food, water, heating, comfort, but that's then having the other impact. And I think people are starting to sort of, I don't know, make some personal changes. I mean, I've never seen so many people interested in fitness classes, or people who don't drink. All of that is quite a buzz. That the gym on a Friday night is busy now compared to it never used to be. And I know, there'd be someone in hospitality moaning at me for saying that, but pubs aren't as busy as they were. And there is a cost thing, obviously, within that. But equally, people are looking at what they're doing to their body now.
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think COVID had a seismic shift on how people do the economy, and the affordability of hospitality is important. And of course, those businesses have still got to be able to afford to pay increased costs through energy and tax and everything else. But I think I had an interesting insight into my nephew's mid-20s. Really bright, very kind, very warm, very active and social, good job, all those things, happy in his life. It has a view that the world will be ending before, he's in late life, because of climate change and because of geopolitics. And I hope he's wrong, but I'm really interested that somebody who's, he's not a conspiracy theorist. He's not, he's very ordinary in his view, but he's uncertain about having children and things like that, he and his friends, because they don't think the world will be here for them to have a good time. So I think it's the point about looking after ourselves into age is really, really complex, because there are so many factors influencing us. But when you say, we're all living better lives, I agree with you that many of us are, but I think there's an increasing divide between wealth and poverty. And also, we look at it, even within small communities, there's a huge divide between wealth and poverty, but clearly there's a massive global divide. And so the challenge for health and well-being is to make it available, make support and enabling services available to as many as possible. And that's one of the reasons that, Eargym has an ambition to be global, in order to enable people to live well as long as possible.
Yeah. And fantastic mission that you've got there. During this journey of the last 4 years, what have you learned as a founder, and how do you not, I guess overwork is probably the best way to put it, because it's really hard when you're starting something new not to just work constantly and you're passionate about it. What do you do to keep yourself sort of, separate from work?
Yeah, it's difficult to not think about it because it's our business. And, there's plenty to think about. Andy and I have both had long careers in different, Andy had his own business before. And when we started working together, we had a long conversation about how do we work and how do we make sure that we're in it for the long term. And so we have both had really busy, really hard jobs where we have worked 6.5, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, all those things. And we know that it's not sustainable and it didn't do either of us any good in terms of our long-term, our mental well-being at the time. Mm. And so we know that for Eargym to succeed, we need to keep ourselves healthy. And so we very consciously say to our team, our full-timers, we say, we want you to work 35 hours. We don't mind when you work it. We want you to get the right work-life balance. You work 35 hours through the week. You need to be at certain meetings, but we are not clocking on and clocking off. We'll know if you're doing, we understand what you can deliver in that time. But we are very proactive about saying we want you to stop because we want you to want to be at work when you are here. And we want your best productive time. And we try to apply that ourselves. I mean, clearly it's not possible to do it in 35 hours a week, but we do really try to have conscious downtime. And we monitor that people are taking holiday. We use an HR system. But if I see that people are behind on booking holidays and stuff, then we ask them to make sure that they're booking holidays and things. We do not want people to burn out because it's poor for not only for the individuals themselves and their families, but then also for the business because we want to go for the long term.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point because we do, obviously, we've been talking about our bodies and our physical health, but actually your mental health, I mean, that's a major thing affecting the population at the moment and workforces. And it's really important, actually, that you get that balance right with work of not just encouraging physical health, but mental health as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned physical health. Of course, that's, that's something that we're all, Andy's a really good tennis player. I do a lot of hill walking. I live in the country. Dog, every day. Andy's also heavily into nutrition. So we're sort of, whenever we have team meetings, we're all pretty healthy about what we eat, and things like that. So there's a good sort of influencing thing actually from everybody in the team. But physical health, obviously, we take every opportunity we can to look after ourselves.
Yeah. And equally, you were saying about making sure people take holiday, what hours they think, that's looking after your team's mental health as well, because you want people to work well and perform well when they're working for you. And you want them to be, in the right mindset for that.
Yeah, I'd much rather have one really, really good hour, really productive hour than 5 hours of staring at a screen being inattentive. No use to me.
No, completely agree with you. Just to finish off today, what tip would you give to someone thinking about launching a business, but perhaps they need to, generate funding for? What do you maybe wish you knew right at the start of this journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. We, I'm brand new to startup, and we listen. You get a huge amount of advice and a huge amount of over-optimistic advice and guidance. So, people were in 2019, 2020, when we were on our Zinc Accelerator, people were talking about, well, you've got to raise 3 million. You'll probably have revenue of 25 million in 3 years. The figures are just bonkers. We didn't know enough at the time to know what was good advice and what was just over-optimistic nonsense. And I was going to say something else then.
Yeah.
But, Andy and I both knew that we could go for maybe a year without earning. And as it happened, he and I chose all the resources that we raised. We chose to engage, employ and contract people to build the business during that time. Actually, it took 2 years before Andy and I took any kind of salary from the business, any kind of income. And that meant that both of us were really stretched and our families were really stretched because we're both earners alongside our respective families. I wish that I had known just how hard it is to start, and how long it takes to start, and to build people's confidence that you are worth investing in and that you have something that is going to be revenue generating. And I am grateful for the fact that Andy and I had conversations beforehand about how long we had and how we could do it and how we would spend resources in the meantime. But that said, if somebody had said to me, you won't be earning for 2 years and then you won't be earning much, and your lifestyle will change significantly, I don't think that I would have taken the leap, because it was quite a significant change. So in some ways, I'm really grateful for all of the nonsense that come, all this, it'll all be fine. It's just, I wouldn't have taken the leap, and I'm really glad that we did.
That's brilliant advice, because I think the rewards eventually get there, and the passion you've got for your business, I can clearly sense from you. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me today and telling me about what you do and explaining the impact that our ears can have on our general health. I wish you all the best with the business. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. I hope, if you don't mind, I hope your listeners can get onto the app stores and download Eargym and try it for a couple of days and then give us some feedback. And of course, subscribe if you like it.
Yeah, brilliant. I certainly will myself. So yeah, I encourage everyone to go and check it out.
Thanks ever so much, Matt. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.